Hello everyone, this is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto awakened a Byakugan-like bloodline and was claimed by the Hyuga, changing fate with Hinata, Hanabi, Sakura, Ino, Tenten, Tamari, Anko and Kurenai, Part 2. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. Well, that's that. Also, in the much later chapters, when Naruto and Hinata are finally married, think after the 3-year-long training mission with Jiraiya, do you want it at that part, or do you want me to just smooth things over? I'll take a vote on this, and each time I update, I'll tally all the votes up to that time. Well, unless I don't get any votes for one side or the other by the time I update next chapter. Then, I'll just say it's unanimous and go with that decision. Anyway, on to the story. Hinata had her Byakugan active, scanning all around and as far towards the smoke as she possibly could. As they were leaping through the trees, she couldn't quite stop in her tracks, but she did manage to stop at the next branch. Naruto landed next to her. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "They're outnumbered. I see at least 10 Junin, 15 Chunin, a score of Genin, and a squad of what looks like Anbu class. They're all from Sound." The panic was rising in her voice. Naruto let out a string of some very colorful words that Hiashi would have paled at, if he knew one of his clan's members had said anything of the sort. "What about Ibiki and Choji?" Hinata paled and looked again. "Unconscious." "Shit." Naruto's eyes scrunched up, and it was obvious he was thinking hard. "Okay, we need to get them out of there, wake up the Chunin, alert any patrols in our vicinity, and get back to Konoha. Here's what we're gonna do. Oi, Kenmaru, you sense anything?" "No. The area is secure, right?" "Yes." "Good." It was at that moment that Naruto and Hinata's plan commenced. Slowly, an unnatural fog that was tinted black rolled in from the forest. The Sound Ninja were on edge. "Ah, what's that?" A black specter that seemed to just materialize out of the mist was seen by the group in the edges of the clearing. Its eyes glowed blue, and the killing intent that rolled off of it made all but the Anbu and Junin freeze up in fear. The shadows around it seemed to roll off of it and onto the ground. Many of the plants around the thing were wilting and dying as if their life force had been sucked out. As silently as it had appeared, it was gone. 1 minute it was standing there, and it just seemed to dissipate the next. Suddenly, without warning, 50 of these specters jumped out of the trees and charged forward, each engaging a nin, and all the Anbu were double-teamed, as well as some of the Junin. The fighting was brutal, but the specters were held off. That is, until the volley of chakra arrows pierced the smoke left behind when each cage bunchen dissipated. Needless to say, almost all of the Genin and most of the Chunin were either dead or incapacitated. Only 2 or 3 of the Junin couldn't fight, but all of the Sound Nin, including the Anbu, had some sort of injury, even if it was only a few bruises here and a closed tenketsu there. After the volley of arrows, the wind started to blow away the mist, leaving an empty clearing. "Shit. Sir, the Konoha patrol is gone. Damn it. Word could get back to their village. We need to catch them." As the group slowly pulled themselves together, they jumped into the tree branches to chase after whoever it was that had attacked them. Unfortunately for them, the trees were little more than a minefield of proximity-activating explosive notes. The first few explosions took out at least 1 enemy nin each, but after that, they became more cautious. Unfortunately for them, this slowed their progress to a crawl. The snares and projectile traps added to their losses. Needless to say, they were pissed. Hinata was again acting as the forward scout. Behind her, the real Naruto was actively gleaning the chakra around him to replenish what he had used to make the mist, cage bunchen, the volley of chakra arrows, set the traps, and place the nasty genjutsu in their wake. It was the finest one Ibiki had taught them. Basically, it made each person caught in it face their greatest fear. The thing was, Naruto had poured nearly half of his chakra reserves from the seal into making it. The amount of chakra was more than enough to give it the power to physically inflict the wounds the genjutsu told their mind they had. It could easily be fatal. Another fourth of his total capacity was everything else he had done, leaving him at 1/4 power. At least, he's at 1/4 of what he can access. I'll get into more detail later. To put it simply now, the seal can hold about the power of 9.5 of the tails of Kyuubi. The extra half was a buffer so that the seal wouldn't overload and break. Kyuubi was never sealed, so the seal was filled with Naruto's chakra, roughly the power of a 9 tails in amount of chakra, but Uchiha is much more potent than even nature chakra. If those ninja catch up to us, I won't have the power to stop them. I have to replenish my reserves as soon as possible. The Kage Bunshin that were carrying the unconscious forms of Ibiki-sensei and Choji were also gleaning small amounts and sending it back through the link into Naruto, effectively increasing the rate at which it was gathered. Unfortunately, the Kage Bunshin could only do so much if they didn't want to make themselves dissipate. They shrugged and kept at it as they made their way back to camp. Kujmaru rolled over in his sleeping bag. He snuggled closer to his lover. Miho, in turn, snuggled closer to him. Damn, it's too early to get up. Man, now I can't get back to sleep. He sat up and thought about how life had been since he'd started this assignment. At first, it was all business, patrolling the border with little interaction between his team and himself. But, as things progressed, Miho had fallen for him, and he felt the same way. At least their nights were no longer completely uneventful, so things weren't as bad as they could have been. Besides, there were no worries about Miho getting pregnant anytime soon. Kujmaru wasn't a medic nin for no reason. He knew all the most effective birth control jutsu, and used them accordingly. Fun. Miho groaned and sat up next to her lover. Kage-kun, why are you awake so early? I can't sleep, Miho-chan. Something is telling me to get up. It was then that a group of the Kage Bunshin Naruto had sent reached their destination, home base. All of them except one quickly packed up everything into their respective places as neatly and efficiently as possible. One, however, had the misfortune to wake up, the lovers, as they had been christened by Choji. He tapped the side of the tent a couple times to make them wake up. Oi, you two awake in there? Yes, Naruto. What do you want? Kujmaru's sleep-laden voice replied. Ibiki-sensei and Choji were attacked, so Hinata and the boss are taking them back to Konoha, and try to bring reinforcements, or at least alert Konoha to the apparent invasion force. Me and the other clones are packing up the camp and heading back home. You two gotta get up and follow us so we can meet up with the boss. What? Miho and Kujmaru said in stereo. Come on, there's no time. A few minutes later, a thankfully fully dressed pair of Chunin exited their tent, which was rapidly taken down and placed on the back of one of the many Kage Bunshin that were being used as pack mules. Let's go, a clone said before they took off in a seemingly random direction. The 3 Anbu that were left alive were stalking the group of what seemed to be 3 genin, one of which was unconscious along with their Junin sensei. One had made some Kage Bunshin to carry their unconscious teammates. With a few hand signals, one was told to get ahead of them to stop them. After a few minutes, the Anbu appeared on a branch in front of the Hyuga that was leading the group. To say that the Anbu was surprised at her next action would be an understatement. Most Anbu expect genin to stop in their tracks and shake in fear when facing them. However, it seemed that Hinata had some built-up rage to release. She did so, in the form of her attack. Hake Rokuju Yansho. By the time she was done, the surprised Anbu had a large amount of Tenketsu sealed up. Sure, he had managed to block about half of the attacks, but that only resulted in disabling his arms. The final blast had been to the heart and the forehead. The Anbu thanked the gods that he'd worn his forehead protector on his forehead underneath his mask. The mask cracked, but he was saved from death. He was knocked out though, and fell from the branches. The other 2 Anbu continued to chase their targets, oblivious to the bone-crunching landing of their friend. It didn't help the poor ninja's career that he'd landed on his head, effectively pulverizing his spinal cord, severing most of the nerves in his neck. Ouch. Thankfully, he was unconscious before then. It seemed that luck was with the other two Anbu. With a swift kick, a volley of kunai and shuriken, and several well-placed blows, their targets were effectively held off. Hinata struggled against the ninja wire that bit into her flesh, thankful for the thick leather of her jacket to protect her arms. She had been tied up, and was being held by her throat by one of the Anbu. The other was standing over her two unconscious teammates, while Naruto could only watch as the nin holding her put a kunai against her throat. Move even an inch, and I kill her. Put her down. The icy cold look in Naruto's eyes and menace in his words told the two Anbu that if their hostages got away, their deaths would be slow and painful. But what's the worst a mere genin could do? Ha! You couldn't kill a fly even if you wanted to. I'll give you one last chance. Here, Naruto activated his Amatsu Tenshi no Senshu and drew the string back, letting a chakra arrow form. Let her go. What's the worst you could do? I'm an Anbu, you pathetic waste of sperm. You can't hurt me. You aren't even at the level of a genin's shit. With that, the arrow was released. Before it had traveled even a foot, it split into 128 different arrows. Naruto called out his attack. Amatsu Tenshi no Senshu Hake, Hyakunaju Hachiya. Heavenly Angel's Bow, 128 arrows of Hake. Note, this is an approximate translation. The only thing I know is right is the Hyakuniju Hachi. I know enough Japanese to be able to count. You need to know at least that if you're gonna spend 6 weeks there. It helps when shopping in the open-air markets. Vendors need to be able to tell you the prices of their goods. Closing parenthesis. The arrows sped around the ninja, looking for all the world to have missed. The man's grin, although hidden behind a mask, faded when he saw each and every arrow curve around and strike him simultaneously. He was thrown into the air, dropping Hinata, and landed hard on his shoulder. Your tenketsu have been sealed. You cannot mold chakra anymore. Unfortunately for you, all my arrows have inserted nature chakra into your system. You have less than a minute to live. Goodbye. The smooth monotone Naruto said this in Think Like Neji when he's talking about fate. Sent shivers up and down the spines of both Hinata and the other Anbu. They watched in horror as the nature chakra mixed with the human chakra. The result? A modified version of life force. Unfortunately for the Anbu, he was in a woodlands. As this mixture leaked into the ground, the grass underneath him shot up, completely piercing his body. The screams he let off confirmed his pain, only to be silenced later as the roots of trees pierced the man's body, sucking it dry of the precious mixture. All the plants that absorbed the life force grew before their eyes. The already gigantic trees shot up several stories above the others, and the grass stalks became as thick as Naruto's wrists, almost like bamboo. There was nothing left of the man's body save for a large clump of the super-sized grass that fed off the corpse's nutrients. The other Anbu was frozen in fear. It didn't help that Naruto's gaze switched to him. Before Naruto could react, though, the Anbu pulled out a kunai and threw it at the stunned Hinata. Hinata, look out! Naruto's shout came too late. Hinata's gaze switched to the Anbu. As soon as her eyes made contact with him, she felt a massive pain in her left eye. Naruto could only watch in horror as the thrown kunai caught Hinata off guard and completely pierced her eye. Hinata's blood-curdling scream resounded through the forest as her hand reached up to try to stem the flow of blood that poured from her wound. Naruto dashed forward as Hinata fell to the ground. Hinata-chan. Hinata looked up at Naruto's face as he crouched over her. She could only see half of what she usually could. A strange calm came over her. Her voice was racked with pain. She shuddered and reached out a hand, cupping Naruto's masked face. Naruto-kun, Ashitaru, her body went limp. Naruto grabbed her hand and held it to his face. His tears were soaking the front of his mask, but he didn't care. He could only watch as his closest friend died in his arms. He was unable to do anything. His grief slowly changed, turning itself into pure rage. Naruto stood and faced the Anbu that had thrown the kunai. The killer intent rolling off of him was strong enough that it was being felt all the way in Konoha. They'd never felt anything this strong, save for from the Kyuubi. Naruto reached down into his seal, pulling all the chakra he could out of it. It flooded and burned his chakra pathways. It wasn't enough. He kept pulling and pulling. Rocks and clumps of dirt and grass started floating into the air by the massive amount Naruto was gathering. A revelation came over him. If I draw much more, my chakra pathways will be burned beyond use. It's not enough. Damn it. Wait. What if I pull it not through my chakra pathways, but outside my body? With that though, Naruto found the hole in the seal that Kyuubi had made while escaping it that fateful day. He forced everything he had out that hole, molding it around his body. To the Anbu, he only saw the Gaki shaking in rage. Boy was he surprised when chakra exploded from his body. The chakra was shining such a bright blue that the boy's shadowed outline was the only thing visible. Naruto's eyes were glowing the same bright piercing blue that his chakra was as his bloodline captured each and every iota of chakra his seal had expelled. He gathered it around him like a shroud. It took no shape or form recognizable. It seemed to float around the boy like a wildfire, but flowed and rippled like water. The chakra shroud was huge, fully taller than the trees, despite their recent growth spurt. It tore into the ground as it swirled around him, tearing spiral patterns that flowed out from him. Naruto finally had gathered enough. Naruto stretched his arm out, his hand open, extended towards the shaking form that was a sound Anbu. The chakra around Naruto flew towards his enemy, completely surrounding him. It picked him up several feet into the air. The man could only float there, completely held by the chakra that was filled with the need for his blood. Die. Naruto's cold, emotionless voice would have sent shivers down anyone's voice, but no one save for his enemy was around to hear it. The chakra formed a sphere around the man. Soon, the ball began to shrink, constricting tighter and tighter. The Anbu couldn't stop its inexorable pressure. Bones cracked and snapped as they were broken from the pressure. The ball continued to get smaller, despite the shower of blood that violently sprayed out from it. It kept getting smaller and smaller, squishing what was left into a tiny ball, smaller than a marble. The energy had compressed the man's atoms together into an ultra-dense black stone. Nothing else was left of the Anbu, save for the kunai in Hinata's eye and the blood that coated the entire clearing. Naruto could only smile to himself as darkness clouded his vision. His form slowly sank down, completely drained. The tiny amount of chakra left in him would keep him alive for little more than a few hours. At least Hinata's death has been avenged. It was then that he finally drifted into unconsciousness, oblivious to the world. Halo here. Phew, that was fun. I was thinking about continuing this chapter, but I decided I'd just post it and write another one later. I don't know how much time I'll have this week. Anyways, there are a couple of things I gotta go over before I post. It doesn't matter how much chakra you have, it only matters how much you can force through your chakra system. If a genin was given the same amount of chakra that a Kage had, it wouldn't allow him to do high-level jutsu until his chakra pathways grew enough to accommodate the high flow of chakra needed. Naruto found a way around this by molding it outside his body. He is the only one able to do this because of his bloodline, so this technique would be useless for anyone else, and they'd just waste all that chakra. That's why Orochimaru's cursed seal needs a person to die. They are forced to regrow their chakra pathways to accommodate the incredible influx of chakra they receive from it. It's a decent explanation, I think. The only reason Naruto and Hinata have been doing so well against the Sound Ninja is because they made a great plan, caught them off guard, had several hours to set traps beforehand, and didn't try to fight them, only distract them to get their comrades out of the enemy's clutches. If Naruto had stayed to fight, he would have died, even with his new technique to control his massive demon-sized chakra stored in the seal. Nature chakra is like the chakra of the planet. Human chakra is the chakra of a person. Mix the incredible energy of dead or non-living chakra with live or living chakra and that's what you'll get. In my story at least. It's nothing more than life force on steroids. The plants were drawn to it, and it helped them grow at the rapid rate they did. It only lasted till it was gone, but it still killed the man. No worries about him coming back any time soon. I doubt his soul would even be able to reincarnate after that. The other Anbu. Naruto's chakra compressed the atoms of his body together to create the black stone. It took a lot of energy. Almost all 9 taels worth Naruto could store. Before he was able to mold the chakra outside his body, he only had access to about 1/100th of a tael of chakra. The chakra he could access was roughly equivalent to a low or mid-level Junin. Yeah, he's got a lot more now. More than all of the cages combined and doubled. Yep. It comes with a price though. Like I said, he can only draw so much chakra at the same time without killing plants or disrupting the planet's chakra. Sure, some plants dying isn't horrible, but if he disrupts the Earth's chakra, he could literally cause the world to become unstable. Basically, the end of the world. Yeah, dangerous bloodline. I think Kami-sama would jump in before that happened though. You never know. So, because Naruto used up almost all of his chakra, it will be quite a long time at the rate it usually takes him to regain it all. About 1.5 years. I've got another idea for it though, but you'll just have to wait. To say that Kenmaru was pissed would be like saying Itachi liked Pocky or Naruto thought ramen tasted okay. It was a massive understatement. 2 genin. All it took to completely stop the first wave of the Sound's planned invasion was 2 genin. Otokage-sama will not be pleased, he though to himself. Of the 4 Anbu, 10 Junin, 15 Chunin, and 21 Genin, their numbers had been reduced to 4 Junin, 7 Chunin and 9 Genin. All 4 Anbu had been wiped out by that thing. The strange phantasm that was apparently a member of the Genin team supporting the border patrol had done most of the damage. How he did so was painfully obvious. First, he played off of our fears, what with the creepy fog and that strange shadow that surrounded him. That was almost as scary as Orochimaru-sama on a bad day. Next, he surprise attacked us with Kage Bunshin and those strange chakra attacks. Then, his teammate and him carried off our prisoners and led us straight into a load of traps. We didn't see them because we were so intent at perusing them. Then, the Anbu disappeared as they were the only ones capable of following them. By the time the rest of us caught up to the battle site, one was paralyzed from a broken neck, and we never found the bodies of the other 2. It appeared that the last Anbu was killed in the initial ambush. Damn it all. By the time we had arrived, they had vanished. Damn it. At this rate, we'll never finish reinforcing our position before the Konoha forces arrive. A rather long and colorful string of curses flowed out of the man's mouth. Under his orders, everyone who could make Iwa, Mizu, Kage, or Suna Bunshin were told to make as many as possible to speed up the process of building their outpost. It wasn't as far into the fire country as they'd hoped, but still. Now, if only the Rice Country's army would arrive. Then they'd be set. Naruto could feel each and every ache in his body. Pain flared up each time he was jolted, which was quite a lot. He opened his eyes, squinting from the light that shone into his eyes. His head was resting on the right shoulder of someone. The evening sun was shining in his eyes. Naruto raised his head and took a look around. Miho was carrying a still unconscious Hinata. Her face was turned away from Naruto, so he couldn't see her eye, but she had bandages wrapped around her entire head. He was riding on Kagemaru's back. Some sort of solid Bunshin, whether it was Kage or any of the others, Naruto couldn't tell. Of both of the Chunin were carrying all the luggage that Naruto's clones were carrying before Naruto passed out and his clones dissipated. Naruto groaned at a particularly rough jolt as the pain lanced through his body. It was his overstrained chakra pathways that burned. Shit, this might take a while to heal. In the meantime, Naruto racked his memories in search of one little piece of information. Did my clones get to the other patrols or not? He continually searched over and over. Finally, it came to him. Only the two closest to their sector had been alerted, and had probably alerted the Hokage via messenger birds. The two Chunin stopped, setting down their passengers. With a nod, Miho took off to set traps so they could rest, while Kujmaru checked over the injured genin. Naruto is doing okay, despite coming out of a ridiculously outmatched battle. His chakra pathways are badly burned, but they should recover. Hinata, it's just too sad. In a clan that values eyesight above all else, she had a high chance of losing her eye. I can't be sure yet, but, at best she'll have a blind spot right in front of her, even if it heals up. Well, unless Tsunade Hime herself came to heal her, but she hasn't been seen in years. Naruto groaned and tried to sit up, only to fail and lie back down. Water, please. Kujmaru held the canteen over the boy's lips so he could slowly drink. After nearly draining the container, Naruto nodded slightly in thanks and drifted back into unconsciousness. Miho landed next to Kujmaru. How are they doing? Naruto will recover in about a month, and at least a week of that has to be in the hospital or his chakra pathways could be scarred permanently. Hinata, well, she'll be lucky if she doesn't lose her eye, but even more so if she still has any decent sight out of it. In any case, she's gonna be nearly half blind for the rest of her life. Miho seemed to wither, remembering her and Kujmaru's original teammate back when they were still on a genin team. Flashback warning. This flashback will make you cry. Don't read if you don't want to. Ahaya, Miho-chan. Ahaya, Kujmaru-kun. The other person just smirked. His pale eyes were obviously that of a Hyuga, but surprisingly, his hair was an almost exact copy of his pale eyes color, rare but not unheard of trait in the Hyuga family. He wore the typical black pants and pale cream-colored jacket that composed the Hyuga training outfit. His left arm and right leg were bandaged. The pack he wore was light, containing only the bare necessities. Ah, Kenji-sama is in a bad mood. Quote, man, I knew you were good at the Hyuga Grimace no Jutsu, but to be able to maintain it 24/7 is nothing short of amazing. It's true that the Hyuga are really great, aren't they, Miho-chan? Miho giggled, of course. At least he isn't doing his signature move, the Hyuga monologue no Jutsu. That one is truly scary. The two burst out laughing while Kenji just sat there, leaning against the building he was standing by, his face completely emotionless. Apparently the Uchiha and Hyuga had something in common other than black hair, a dujutsu, and sticks up their asses. They also had that annoying emotionless face that was either annoyed, apathetic, or in an arrogant smirk. It must be true that they were related. So, you guys ready for the second exam? The Junin that had landed near the three genin was very typical. He wore the standard Junin uniform, and wore his forehead protector on, so uniquely, sarcasm, on his forehead. Daisuke-sensei, you're the one who trained us. You of all people should know we're gonna kick everyone's asses. An exited Kujmaru nearly shouted. He did shout and carry on when their team was first formed, but they had broken him of that particular habit. It's a shame that the Hyuga was too far gone, oh well. Well then, it's almost 9 o'clock, so get going. 8 hours later, Kujmaru was lying on the ground, his body partially covering Miho's. Kenji stood in the typical Juyukin stance, Byakugan activated, staring at the three rock nins that were facing him. Give up your scroll and we'll leave, after we have our fun with the girl. Shut up, you bastard. Miracle upon miracles, Kenji spoke. It's ninja like you that give us a bad name. Why don't you just run along and play with that microscopic thing you call genitals in the bushes? Why you little? The three attacked. Each and every attack was blocked by the Hyuga, and several quite deadly counter-attacks were flung back at them. Two were down, but the team captain was still standing. He pulled out a kunai and attacked. Slash after slash was dodged. For nearly 5 straight minutes this went on, until finally Kenji was off balance. He was in a position that he couldn't correct and would either have to fall, making him an easy target, or completely stop to correct himself, which would make it easier to attack him. The Rock Nin's attack had just slashed diagonally down to his left. With a sudden reversal, the knife flipped from a reverse hold to a traditional hold. Before anyone could do anything, the backslash sliced clean across the Hyuga's face. Blood flew through the air in little droplets, almost a mist, as the Hyuga's right eye was sliced completely through. The ninja pulled his arm back and plunged his kunai deep into the Hyuga's chest. Hyuga Kenji, one of the more talented of the branch members, was dying. The Rock Nin spat on the Hyuga's now prone form. Pathetic. Wasn't even worth my time. Rage overcame Kajmaru. Despite the kunai in his leg that made him wince in pain when he stood, it didn't stop him from activating the most powerful jutsu he knew. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. The fireball caught the Rock Nin off guard. His screams of pain could be heard throughout the forest of death. Kenji was barely alive. His blood was slowly seeping out of the hole in his chest, and it coated his lips, running down the side of his face. It flowed freely from the gash in his pulverized eye. He coughed, tasting the metallic tang of his own blood, spitting it out as best as he could. Kajmaru was kneeling over him trying to reassure the dying Hyuga. It's gonna be okay, Kenji. We'll get out of this. Don't die on me. Where? Cough or your insults cough now, Doby. Damn it. Don't die on me. You were Rookie of the Year, you can't die. Hyuga are supposed to be invincible. I swear if you die on me I'll pull you back from the afterlife and kill you myself. Cough cough cough. Will you do one last thing? Cough, for me, Kajmaru. Yeah, I'll do it. Just don't die on me. Kenji reached his hand up and grasped Kajmaru's. He pulled out a kunai and slit both his own palm and his friend's, grasping his hand. He let their blood mix. When I die, tell my cough family, the color, cough, of my eyes, cough brother. With one final fit of coughing, Hyuga Kenji, top of his graduating class, smiled. Not a smirk, not a grimace, but a true and genuine smile. His eyes closed for the last time, and for the first and last time, Kajmaru saw tears slide down his friend, no, his brother's face. His own tears were dripping off his chin and onto the dead boy's almost peaceful face. With one finger, he lifted the eyelid of his friend's unmarred eye. He was staring into a lifeless golden brown, a far cry from the pale lavender he was used to seeing. Slowly, he closed the eye again before crawling over to the unconscious form of his other teammate and sobbing himself to sleep. End flashback. Okay, it's safe to continue reading now. Before either of them could react, a large group of medic nin and two Anbu squads jumped into the clearing. They tensed up for a moment before recognizing the leaf emblem all over their various items. One Anbu approached them and said, "Report." They explained the situation to them while the medics patched up a still unconscious Naruto, Hinata, Ibiki, and Choji. They loaded them onto stretchers and jumped into the treetops, making as much haste as possible to get them back to the Konoha General Hospital. I see. You were ordered to return to Konoha and await further orders from the Hokage. Hi. The two Chunin took off, passing another two squads of Konoha Anbu as they met up with the others. They followed after the medic nins, anxious to see Team 7's fate. Naruto woke up to an annoying beep. It kept beeping and beeping. His eyes were attempting to adjust to the darkness while he reached over to where his alarm clock should be, trying to turn it off. His hand only hit air. Looking over, he saw wires and tubes coming off his body, and a heartbeat monitor. So that's the beeping I hear. Feeling too tired to try to stand, but too awake to go back to sleep, he drew out a little chakra from his surroundings, testing his chakra pathways. They were still stinging in a couple of places, like his palms, but for the most part were in working order. They were much larger than before, but they still worked. Dropping into a trance, Naruto extended his awareness, slowly building links to his body, a trickle of chakra coming from each link into his seal, keeping him alive. Slowly, it would fill, but at this rate, it would take a very long time. Not in days, or weeks, but more in months. Around 16 at this rate, and that's if he didn't use any between then and now. He sighed and drifted off to sleep. The last thought that ran through his head before he finally fell into its kind embrace was, I wonder if Hinata is okay. Naruto finally woke. Then next morning, the doctor came in and gave him a checkup. The doctor was at first puzzled as to why Naruto had no chakra, but Naruto explained to him about his bloodline and the empty, or nearly empty anyway, seal. The doctor was rather surprised, but eventually released him from the hospital on strict orders of bed rest for the next week and a half. No training, no chakra molding if at all possible, just the life of a civilian until his chakra pathways had sealed and he has a decent amount of chakra stored up again. So, naturally, the first thing Naruto did is, if you thought training, you're wrong. He went to see his teammates. Sighing, Naruto slowly and quietly pushed open the door to Ibiki-sensei's room. His Junin instructor, although rather intimidating and very verbally abusive, had grown on the three, and Naruto wouldn't trade him for the world. He found him to be, surprisingly, awake. Ibiki-sensei, how are you doing? Oh, I'm still rather sore, Naruto. The knockout poison they gave me wasn't really that potent, but it turns out that I'm allergic to it. So, my chakra is messed up for the next week or so. I'm stuck in bed till the day after tomorrow at least. At least you're alive. I'm glad. Ibiki smiled, something he really only did since accepting this genin team. It's good to know someone cares. Ibiki-sensei, do you have any family? Ibiki smiled sadly. Not really. My parents were killed when I was a genin, my brother ran away from Konoha and became a messenger, and my wife, here, he paused. The most feared man in Konoha was on the verge of crying. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry. No, it's perfectly okay. I'm glad to know that at least 3 people accepted me for me, not for my title. Being chief interrogator and captain of the torture and interrogation squad gives you a nasty reputation. I'm more than glad I gave that position to Anko. She's even better than I was. Silence slowly fell in the room. For a half of an hour, they sat in silence, just enjoying each other's company. Finally, Naruto spoke up. Ibiki-sensei, I'm going to go check on Choji and Hinata. I hope you get well. I'd bring you some flowers, but something tells me that's not your style. Ibiki chuckled. Naruto stood and walked out of the room. Slowly, he wandered the halls, finding his way to Choji's room. He slowly opened the door, again not wanting to wake his teammate as he is sleeping. Choji was still asleep. True, Naruto didn't get a good look at him while he and his clones were moving him from the ambush spot, but now, it was painfully obvious that Choji had fought the group with Ibiki. Almost all of Choji's fat had disappeared, and his well-toned muscles stood out underneath his skin. Naruto smiled knowingly at the flowers and get-well cards that were marked as being from Shikamaru and Ino, and a large basket of junk foods from his family. Naruto smiled at the barbecue pork-flavored chips that made up of most of the basket, knowing that was his favorite. I'm definitely gonna have to take him out to barbecue when he's out of the hospital. He'll enjoy that. Naruto again stood up after spending a few moments with his teammate, no, his friend. He walked towards his final destination for the day, hoping and praying that she was okay. Flashback. Hinata looked up at Naruto's face as he crouched over her. She could only see half of what she usually could. A strange calm came over her. Her voice was racked with pain. She shuddered and reached out a hand, cupping Naruto's masked face. Naruto-kun, Ashitaru, her body went limp. Naruto grabbed her hand and held it to his face. His tears were soaking the front of his mask, but he didn't care. He could only watch as his closest friend died in his arms. End flashback. Did she really mean it? Did she really love me? I know she liked me, and I know she had a major crush on me, but, was it truly love? And why do I feel like I do when I think about her? What do I feel for her? What do I truly want from her? Friendship or love? Naruto continued to ponder this as he slowly approached Hinata's room. However, just before he entered it, a doctor stopped him. Hyuga-san, Hinata-san is awake, but I'm not sure if you want to see her. She is rather depressed. I don't know how she'll handle visitors. Sir, she is my teammate, and more so, she's my friend. She needs me, and I'll be damned to the seventh layer of hell before I leave a friend in need. The doctor recoiled at the killer intent and incredible intensity Naruto spoke those words with. He slowly nodded, lowering his head in defeat. Naruto slid open the door so see Hinata sitting up in bed, her head hanging down, bandages covering nearly half her head. It was painfully obvious from the dampness of the bandages and blankets and from the swelling around her eyes that she had been crying for quite a while. Hinata-chan. She looked up as Naruto walked over to sit in a chair next to her and sat down. She looked at him for a moment before looking away. He'll never accept me now. If I couldn't get him before now, then I sure as hell can't get him now that I'm disfigured. She burst into another wave of silent tears. This did not slip past Naruto. He leaned in and gave her a warm, comforting hug. Hinata-chan. Naruto-kun, what will father say? Could barely pass his tests before, but now. Hinata leaned into the hug Naruto had not broken, crying into his shoulder. He just sat there and held her, not quite sure of what to do. So he did what just felt natural to him. He softly patted her back, trying to comfort her while whispering to her. Shish, it'll all be okay, I won't abandon you. Trust me. And if Hiyashi-sama tries to do anything about a wound you honorably received in battle, I'll shove his marriage bed so far up his that he'll never find it again. It's okay, just let it all out. Hinata cried for another couple of minutes before finally sitting back, only hiccuping every few minutes or so. I wish there was something more I could do for you. Hinata, if there is anything you want me to do for you, just ask. I'll do anything so see you smile again. Hinata's eye widened at this statement. No, this promise. She thought back to what she said just before she passed out. I have to ask him, Kami-sama, if you have wished good fortune on me, please let me have the courage to tell him. Naruto, I need to know. She paused. Her unbandaged pale lavender eye looked deeply into his. Naruto could see the pain and the yearning in them. Naruto, I need to know, how do you feel about me? Will you ever love me, or are we forever fated to remain just fiends? Hinata. Everything that had happened in the past few days rushed through his mind. He felt the anger, the rage, he felt how much he wanted to protect Konoha, his team and Hinata, and when he was passing out, he remembered how angry he felt that she had died. And when he had killed her attackers, he remembered feeling, it was something he couldn't describe. It was something like his desire to protect her, but, also, it was more. A longing to make her happy, a need to make her smile, even if it cost him his own life. There was only one word he had ever heard that could describe something like this, love. Hinata, I would go to the darkest pits of 7 hells and back again to see you smile. All I ask is that you never leave me again. Hinata's eye widened. Despite her pain, her feelings of inadequacy, despite the fact that she only had one working eye and would be scarred for life, she felt pure, untainted joy well up inside of her. The tight yet gentle embrace Naruto pulled her into after that nearly brought tears to her eyes. She hugged him back, and although they were gently, they could feel the pressure of each other. Hinata was on cloud 9. It didn't matter that the tears were stinging her bandaged eye, it didn't matter that the doctor was watching them this whole time, and it certainly didn't matter that she caught a glimpse of her father standing in the doorway, one of his few genuine smiles playing on his lips before he slowly and quietly closed the door. Naruto, I've never been good with words, I can barely make 2 sentences without stuttering. But if I could say it in any way that truly described how I felt about you, I would, but in the end, the truth of it is, I love you, Hyuga Naruto. I wouldn't leave you for the world. Naruto felt warm. Her heartbeat could be felt even through his thick jacket. It thumped in time with the beeping of the machine. Naruto, unable to find words for what he wanted to say, broke the embrace. Hinata took this as a sign of rejection, and immediately she dropped her head, letting her posture sink into a dejected husk of what she was just a moment before. She didn't even register the fingers she felt under her chin, and didn't seem to notice Naruto lifting her head. What finally brought her out of this fall was when she felt something on her lips. Hinata's mind went completely blank when she felt Naruto's lips on hers. The action she had been dreaming about for as long as she could remember had happened, and the only thing she could do was freeze up. Finally, when her mind had caught up, she let her arms wrap around her love, gentle yet assuring. Newfound confidence flowed through her and she leaned into him as best as she could from her semi-prone position. After a minute or two, they split and stared into each other's eyes. Their hands found each other's and their fingers interlaced. Naruto scooted his chair up closer to the bed. He rested his head against the pillow Hinata was laying on as she scooted down to get more comfortable. They lay there, in complete silence, completely contented with just each other's presence. The small squeezes they gave each other's hand and the snuggling on the pillow was enough for each of them. Slowly, yet inexorably, Hinata drifted into a deep, peaceful slumber. Naruto watched his newly proclaimed love. The happiness, despite the inescapable war waiting on the horizon, overflowed. It wasn't the plastic mask he had donned each day as a child, nor was it the contentedness he displayed at the Hyuga house. This was a true feeling of unconditional love. Love without bounds, willing to do anything for her. Slowly, Naruto started to succumb to sleep, his mind replaying yet again what had happened at the battle site. Suddenly, without warning, he sat up straight. Replaying the memory of the Anbu he killed with his Amatsu Tenshi no Senshuhake, Hyakunoju Hachiya, he saw the plants literally grow instantly. A blast of inspiration flooded him. He quietly stood and left to find Hinata's doctor. After half an hour of searching, he brought the rather confused medical professional to Hinata's room. "Sir, I think I know a jutsu that can save her eye. I don't know exactly how it will affect her. I know that it will cause the cells in her eye to rapidly reproduce. I need to know, if I do this, can you limit and control the growth so that her eye heals properly?" The doctor thought for a moment, playing any and all possible scenario in his mind. If what he says is true, then, yes, it's possible. However, if it gets out of control, there may be uncontrollable and irreversible side effects. Hyuga-san, how exactly do you expect this jutsu to work? Naruto explained to the man about the juiced-up life force he can create. The doctor thought for a moment before finally saying, "I believe it's possible. However, I want at least 4 other doctors here for the operation, and I want Hinata-sama and her father's consent before we do anything. If there is even a 25% chance of this working, you have my consent as long as Hinata agrees." "Hiyashi-sama," both Naruto and the doctor said in unison. What's going on?" Hinata sat up, and her hand halfway to her head from rubbing her eye. Naruto, yet again, explained the situation. "Hinata, it's possible that you could completely lose your eye if this fails. As of now, you will only have partial vision. Do you want to go through with this?" Hinata sat there, mentally debating. She seemed to be wavering in the middle. After a moment, she managed to finally give her answer. "You have my consent. Then it's settled," the doctor said, before running off to get the most skilled doctors in Konoha. Half an hour later, they were in a prepared operating room. The 5 doctors and Naruto stood around Hinata's unconscious form. Naruto was out of his training outfit and into a doctor's uniform. All the medical professionals around him nodded, and Naruto pulled out some chakra from one of the nurses who volunteered for the honor, and mixed it with a fair amount of nature chakra. Naruto experimented with the mix, slowly balancing it into a mixture only twice as strong as normal life force instead of the insane 500 times as strong life force created in the woods. Slowly, he lowered his glowing white hand over Hinata's eye. Mew hoo ho ha ha ha. Fear my cliffhanger of doom. Lol, I'm really hyper right now, sorry. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Thanks for the reviews. I'm starting to think I've created a cult. I've even got bodily threats on me if I don't update soon. It makes me have the warm fuzzies inside. Kinda strange that a threat would do that to you, nay. Anyway, I don't have a lot to say right now, so, I'll see you next time. Oh, and before I forget, no one has voted against a lemon as of right now, so I will have one. I'll just put a warning ahead of it so you don't have to read it if you don't want to. Anyways, I gotta go to bed, school in the morning and all. Laters. Naruto concentrated as best he could. Slowly gathering the modified life force, he slowly let it leak into Hinata's wounded eye. All 5 of the doctors watched in amazement as the cells started multiplying before their eyes. Something was off, all the cells were multiplying, whether or not they were the ones needed or not. Carefully, the doctors cut away and incinerated the extra cells not needed with their chakra scalpels as the eye slowly repaired itself, knitting together like a complete reversal of the wound. Sweat started running down their foreheads, and the nurses carefully wiped it away, making sure none dripped into the wound or onto the unconscious girl. Naruto ignored the doctors as they calmly gave instructions to each other and to the nurses. Naruto just stood there and slowly leaked the life force into her eye, letting the doctors shape and mold the eye back to its former glory. Minutes turned into hours as the time wore on. Despite being naturally adept with chakra and having near-perfect control, Naruto was getting tired. The doctors were much worse off, and had to eat several soldier pills just to keep going. Finally, one of the doctors spoke up. Naruto-san, it's done, you can stop now. Hi. Naruto sat down, profusely thanking the nurse who brought him a glass of cold water. He watched as all 5 of the doctors scanned Hinata's entire body, looking for any adverse side effects, and comparing her newly healed eye with her undamaged one. Slowly, Naruto's eyelids grew heavier and heavier. His eyes drooped, and soon he lost the fight against sleep. With a start, Naruto jumped up, looking around frantically. He was standing next to Hinata's bed, back into the room he visited her in. Naruto smiled and calmed himself down. He sat back down and reached his hand out to lovingly caress her cheek, feeling how smooth her skin was. She smiled in her sleep and rolled over, trapping his hand between her head and the pillow. Her hands unconsciously reached up and grabbed his, holding it closer to her. Naruto felt a tugging at his chest, much like he felt when he saw her die, but this time it was happy. A feeling of bliss, just a few steps beneath euphoria or nirvana, invaded his emotions, throwing all the others to the back of his mind. He reveled in it. He made himself comfortable on the chair, leaning his head back against the back of it. Slowly, sleep made its inexorable march, forcing him to move on to his dreams, all centered on his lavender-eyed love. Slowly, oh so slowly, things began to return to normalcy. Hinata's eye, with a few following checkups, had returned to normal. Due to the kunai piercing her pupil, it was now somewhat slitted, something like a mix between a snake's and a cat's. It was just a slightly deeper shade of the pale lavender that made up her usual eye, and was barely noticeable at all. With a fair amount of training, she managed to bring its usefulness up from the initial 50% capacity it was initially at directly after the surgery to its full 100% capacity. Her Byakugan, before the incident, was still not fully formed. She could only see the outlines of the internal chakra systems, and only the largest third of the Tenketsu, only enough to use the Hake Rokuju Yansho. However, because of her intense and constant training, she had, much like her cousin Neji had done at the age of 10, awakened her bloodline to its fullest potential. The only real difference was the ability to better see the chakra pathways, all the Tenketsu, and doubling the maximum range she could see around her. The last part could be trained even farther, but it would take time. As for Hinata's bold proclamation of her love to Naruto as she lay dying, and Naruto's reaction to her death, after Hinata had been released from the hospital, she'd confessed to him, and he to her. That could be seen on most evenings in some highly recommended restaurants by the Akamichi clan, cinema, and several other places that most people go for entertainments, or dates. The farthest they've ever gotten, though, was some rather intimate kissing and hugging, not having the courage to go farther than that. All in all, the two were in bliss. As for the war between rice and fire countries, it was an obvious routing. Without the element of surprise and the full support of every single ninja in Konoha, the Sound Village withdrew its support. The rice country's armies were utterly defeated by the much larger fire country's numerical and strategic might. In short terms, Rice and Sound got their asses handed to them because a few genin got away from some of their most powerful ninja. The mission offers to Sound was drastically reduced, and their participation in the upcoming Chunin exams was their only chance to regain the respect as good fighters, but only if one of their genin won the tournament. Speaking of the Chunin exams, although it was Konoha's turn to host the event, they utterly refused to allow Sound Nin into their village. Therefore, the rest of the hidden villages held a meeting and decided that it was to be hosted in Kurigakure no Sato. The Mizukage was more than willing to host the event, and declared that any unsanctioned fighting between any shinobi of different villages would get their entire village banned from the event. All the Kage accepted the terms with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Because of the delay in organizing the event, the date that it would start was pushed back almost 2 months. Our team was, at this moment, sitting under a cool tree, studying a few scrolls they'd picked up here and there. Choji was studying a jutsu scroll given him directly by the Sannin Jiraiya, who was rather impressed at his skill with jutsu. Hinata was studying a medical scroll that was written by the legendary Kunoichi of Konoha, the Sannin Tsunade herself. It was, however, only on loan from the Hokage. Naruto, he was actually studying a book of unknown origins. He didn't know where it had come from, how it had got there, or who had given it to him. Apparently, it was a book on taijutsu. It outlined many different forms and kata from a style that not even Maida Guy had heard of. Tai Chi. What really intrigued the boy was that he saw a lot of potential in this style. He could, theoretically, use raw chakra blasts in nearly every single blow the style showed him. It was as if this style was made just for that purpose, but he just continued to study, deciding to learn all the theoretical sides behind the style, which were many, before he actually practiced it. He had already learned some of the most basic kata, and was doing well. He had even shown the book to Guy, who had in turn helped the boy correct his stance so that the moves flowed properly. In return, Guy got to learn a new style just for helping the boy out. It was a mutually beneficial relationship. Things were progressing well for this team, and they had all been given a month's worth of vacation along with the pay for an S-class mission. To top it all off, they had all received the Golden Kunai, a very prestigious award for valor in the midst of combat. They were, to date, the youngest ninja to ever receive this award, and that included its equivalents from the other villages as well. Flashback. Sandaime Hokage stood in front of a pedestal, looking at the assembled ranks of shinobi in front of them, and the crowd of civilians behind them. He cleared his voice before starting his speech. I have called this meeting today to dispel a few rumors. Many of you have heard about the recent incident on the Fire Rice border. Yes, it is true that Rice Country and Otogakure attacked in tandem, intending to invade Fire Country and, eventually, crush Konoha. The area they invaded was currently being patrolled by an undermanned Chunin team. One of their teammates had been injured and extracted to Konoha General Hospital for treatment. In order to enhance our defenses, I ordered the genin team that had escorted the medic Nin to the rendezvous to become a replacement on the team for the out-of-action Chunin. Fortunately for us, that was the best thing that could have happened under the circumstances. Team 7, the first of our experimentally trained genin teams, led by Tokubetsu Junin Morino Ibiki, and displayed fine teamwork in the face of great adversity. The attacking force, while currently estimated at 1 Anbu team, around 10 Junin, nearly a score of Chunin, and 3 dozen Genin, was the spearheading force in the invasion. In a surprise attack, the spearheading force knocked out and captured both Morino Ibiki and Akimichi Choji. The two fought well, injuring and incapacitating at least 10 of the sound nin. After learning that their companions had been captured, Hyuga Hinata and Hyuga Naruto ambushed said group, rescued their friends, and nearly halved the remaining shinobi through well-set traps and genjutsu, as well as killing 3 Anbu. They also managed to alert other border patrols and their 2 Chunin teammates. However, they did not come out without injury. Ibiki and Choji were near death, Hinata had a kunai impaled in her eye, and Naruto had chakra burns throughout most of his system and was suffering from severe chakra depletion. Thankfully, all 4 are almost fully recovered. Choji and Hinata are still in physical therapy, Choji for his massive weight loss and muscle depletion, and Hinata for relearning how to use her recently healed eye. He paused for a moment before continuing. In light of these feats, I would like to bestow upon all members of Team 7 the Red Moon, signifying injuries received in combat. His attendants walked forwards and handed each person a polished wooden box. Also, because of their valor and the role they played in defending our country, I would like to bestow upon them the Golden Kunai. An exited murmur swept through the crowd as each member of the team received another wooden box. I realize that these 3 genin are the youngest to ever receive such a large honor in the history of all shinobi villages. Their actions have brought both their families and their village honor. Because of this, we should honor them in turn. Thank you. The Sandame stepped down from the pedestal, smiling warm-heartedly as the crowd went wild, celebrating Konoha's newest heroes. End flashback. By now, most of the village saw the 3 in a new light. Hinata was no longer seen as the barely passable Hyuga heir, and Choji as the shy Akimichi heir, but as fine shinobi, and heroes even. As for Naruto, by now most everyone knew he was the Yondaime's son, had a unique Byakugan-esque bloodline, and was supposed to be the vessel for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Before, he was seen in a mixed light. Some had still hated him, thinking he was Kyuubi's reincarnation, while others thought neutrally of him. Now, after receiving such praise for his actions during the invasion, he was considered one of Konoha's greatest heroes, as well as one of their greatest prodigies. Needless to say, his already sizable fan club swelled to record numbers, becoming larger than both Neji and Sasuke's combined, but still couldn't match Uchiha Itachi's former fan club. It was now disbanded, but its legacy lives on. In any case, it was much more difficult to get from one point to the next because of the hordes of screaming girls and women. Neji seethed in jealousy as he saw his cousin sitting under a tree, comfortable in the presence of her teammates. Not only did she have better teamwork than his own team, but her Byakugan had somehow developed equal and possibly even surpassing his. Also, she had received honors because, in his mind at least, she was from the main house. He failed to see that her 2 teammates had received the same award. His hatred of the main house had dimmed slightly because of Naruto's presence in the Hyuga household, it had risen again twofold. At least I may have a chance to get my revenge in the Chunin exams. Guy-sensei told us that we'd be participating this year, and I'm certain that her team will be there as well. He smirked darkly to himself, fantasizing about the pain he would deal out to her. His mind snapped back into reality when he heard someone call his name. Oi, Neji-san, what's so funny? Inwardly he seethed, but his only visible emotion was that of apathy. Nothing, Naruto-sama. I was sent to retrieve you and Hinata-sama. You are being summoned by Hyuga-sama. Naruto and Hinata stood up, nodded to Neji, and bid farewell to Choji. After a nice soothing run across the rooftops, they arrived at the compound, and made their way to Hiyashi's personal meditation garden, as instructed. They arrived to see the head of the Hyuga clan, wonder upon all wonders, note heavy sarcasm, meditating. Ah, Hinata, Naruto, come over here please. Hi, they said in unison. They sat down in front of the emotionless man. He opened his eyes and looked at them intently. It has come to my attention that, after Hinata had gotten out of the hospital, you two have been seen in various restaurants, cinemas, and other places. You were seen holding hands, intimately touching, and kissing by several branch members. In public, no less. The two cringed. It was, surprisingly, Hinata that spoke up first. Father, in all due respect, I will continue to see Naruto-kun. Hiyashi's eyebrows raised in surprise at her determination. I love him, and I won't let you separate us. He is the only person I will ever consent to marry, and you can either accept that fact or you can find another heir. Hinata's voice, although quiet throughout her small speech, carried a large amount of emotion and confidence in them. Hiyashi smiled. Naruto truly is bringing out the best in her, and this just makes it easier. Hinata, I realize your attachment to Naruto, but it can't be helped. The council has already had a marriage arranged for you since you were 6 years old. There is nothing you can do except to accept your fate. He raised a palm to stop both of their protests before they even started. The two only glared at him. In order to maintain the clan's honorable name, on the eve of your 16th birthday, you will be wedded, in order to bring a strong man and an equally strong bloodline into the Hyuga clan. But Father Hiyashi-sama, their protests were cut off again. Hiyashi was trying his best to not break out laughing, seeing as they too had no idea what was in store for him. Looks like I have the last laugh for all those pranks, Naruto. He thought. In order to fully accept your marriage, you are to get to know your betrothed from now until you are wed. If you refuse, you will be stripped of your title and you will be branded with the caged bird seal and placed in the branch family, and you will be forced to marry anyway. Hinata seemed to deflate at this news, while Naruto was both shocked and angry. His knuckles were white, his muscles tensing and relaxing, trying his best not to attack the Hyuga head. Hinata, you must accept your betrothed. It is what is best for you. He trailed off as Hinata's tear-streaked gaze met his. She was meek and humble once again. Who have I been betrothed to, father? Her voice was emotionless, yet cold, carrying no feeling whatsoever. Hiyashi's laughter that had been welling up died instantly, and his eyes moistened at the sight of his defeated daughter. Your betrothed is the son of a kage and a very accomplished ninja. His name once was Uzumaki, but he was adopted into the Hyuga clan. Hinata, your betrothed is Hyuga Naruto. They too were speechless. They could only gape, their gazes switching back and forth between Hiyashi and their future spouse. Hiyashi smiled and grabbed one of each of their hands. I know it's unexpected, but I approve of your relationship. A few ground rules. Both you and Naruto are to be virgins of every sense of the matter until your marriage night. I forbid you to go any farther than kissing. Also, you two will remain fully clothed whenever in the same room, with the exception of hot springs and communal baths. When sleeping in the same room, pajamas will be worn at all times. Other than that, you are free to tell anyone you choose about your engagement. I expect you to continue your good behavior during missions and to continue training. Now, if I hear of any of these rules broken, the betrothal will be broken and you two will never be married. Is that clear? Despite his stern tone, the two were grinning broadly and nodding. With that, he placed Hinata's hand in Naruto's. They stood and he embraced the two in a warm, fatherly hug. The rest of the day was a haze for the two stunned teenagers. The only thing they could think of at the time was, we're really getting married. The next morning, Hinata woke early. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she remembered what had happened yesterday. Deciding that a relaxing morning bath was in order, due to the fact they didn't have training scheduled for today, Hinata grabbed a change of cloths, wrapped herself in a robe, and made her way to the bathhouse. Just as she was about to enter, she heard, "Oi, Hinata-chan. Wait up. Naruto-kun. Hi. Thanks for waiting. Let's go in, shall we?" Hi. Both Hinata and Naruto blushed before they entered their respective genders' changing rooms. After a quick scrubbing, they made their way to the central pool, the only one in the complex with mixed bathing. The couple found each other quickly, but the steam was quite thick and hard to see through. Blushing, they sat on opposite sides of a rock that jutted out from the very middle of the pool. Their hands snaked around either side and they laced fingers, comforted by each other's touch. They sat in silence for a few moments. Naruto, deciding to start up a conversation, said, "So, I guess we're going to be married in a few years." "Hi. So, what do you want to do?" I was thinking we should train. I want to look at in the clan library. Would you mind tagging along?" No problem, Hina-chan." Hinata blushed, unseen by anyone, before squeezing Naruto's hand while saying, "Thank you, Naru-chan." Naruto blushed as well, but the steam in the bathhouse was indeed very thick. It went unseen. Slowly, as they started to get lightheaded from the heat, they made their ways back to their changing rooms, and got dressed. Meeting just outside the entrance, Naruto enveloped her into a loving embrace. Hinata smiled and hugged back. She didn't expect him to pull back and plant his lips on hers, but, indeed he did so. She was surprised at first, but gradually melted into his arms, returning the loving and passionate kiss with equal enthusiasm. Their tongue battle was halted abruptly by someone clearing their throat. They looked around embarrassed, their cheeks tinted red. "If you two are done cleaning each other's teeth, would you kindly let me by? I believe that this bathhouse may be used by any Hyuga, not just you two," said a cold, hate-filled voice. "Neji ni-san, gomen nasai." "Sorry, Neji-san." They parted and let the Hyuga prodigy through. Naruto grinned before saying, "Come on, Hina-chan, let's get to the library, nay." Hi. The next morning, Team 7 met at their usual training grounds for their team meeting. Hinata and Naruto arrived hand in hand, as usual, and greeted Choji. After a few pleasantries, they sat down underneath their favorite tree in the training ground. After a few moments, Ibiki arrived like all the other Junin, in a cloud of smoke and a poof. "Mornin'. Good morning, Ibiki-sensei." Hinata was the first to speak up. "Okay, let's get down to business. As you know, the Chunin exams have been moved to Kurigakure. It has been decided that Konoha will only send 3 teams. Many have been nominated, but the 3 that will be going have been chosen by the Hokage himself. We are one of them. Now, just take these forms. Ibiki-sensei, who are the other teams?" Choji said before he continued snacking on his chips. "Ah, yes, the other teams will be Team Guy and Team 9 from your year." "Ha! Sasuke Tem won't be going this year." The other 2 on his team grinned. Sasuke wasn't exactly the most popular person amongst most of the genin, except for his fangirls, and even some of them were growing farther and farther away from the last Uchiha. No, he probably won't, but his team is first in line if any of the 3 chosen teams drop out of the selection. Anyway, like I was saying earlier, you need to fill out these forms and turn them in, as a team, to the Hokage's office by 8 o'clock tonight. We'll have about 5 days to train here in Konoha before we set out. Then we'll have about 2 additional weeks to train before the exams actually start. All in all, we'll be gone for about a month and a half, maybe more depending on how things go, so pack accordingly. Use sealing scrolls, if you have them and you can use them. Any questions? Yeah, I got one. Go ahead then, Naruto. Is there any chance that we can go in disguise and with false names? Why would you do that? Because word has probably gotten out about our accomplishments, and most genin would just give up without fighting any of us. So, I think that, if we truly want a challenge, we should go in disguise. Besides, if anyone from Sound is there, they'd be out for revenge, and I'd rather keep a low profile. Ibiki thought about it for a moment. He weighed the pros and the cons, as well as the possible repercussions if they're discovered. "I think, you should ask Hokage-sama about that tonight when you turn in your papers to him." "Okay. As for now, I want 100 push-ups, 250 sit-ups, 500 jumping jacks, 10 laps around Konoha, and at least 3 hours of sparring on the lake in a free-for-all between you three. Understood. Remembering their training days, the three stood at attention. Sir. Yes, sir. Ibiki grinned uncharacteristically. Get going then. And they did. After their training and an hour's worth of resting, which they used to fill out their forms and think of possible disguises, they made their way to the Hokage's office. After greeting the secretary, climbing the stairs to the top, and nodding to the guards in front of the office door, they knocked. Enter. Naruto pushed open the door and strode forward, bowing politely. The others followed suit before they all sat down. No need to be so formal, Naruto-kun. Sure thing, Hokage Jii-san. The old man smiled. Now, I believe you're here about the Chunin exams, nay? Yes, we have our papers here. Ah, good, good. Hokage Jii-san, I was thinking that maybe we should go in disguise. Oh, Naruto then explained to him his reasoning behind his idea. The Hokage just sat there, nodding and thinking. By the time Naruto had finished, Sarutobi was ready to speak. Naruto, I personally think it's a very good idea, but I do think that the other villages will take it as a sign of weakness if our most honored team is not there for the exams. Should you wish to wear a disguise during any time you are not taking the exam, feel free to do so, but I want you three to be seen in action. Hi, Hokage-sama. Naruto, I told you not to be so formal, he said with a half-serious expression. Sure thing, old man. Sarutobi sighed happily and in mock exasperation. Be sure you're ready. Oh, and one last thing before you go. Team 9 dropped out of the selection and Team 8 has taken their place. Hey, looks like I get to kick Sasuke Thames, if he can make it to the third exam. Everyone in the room grinned. Naruto used his chakra to create a hologram of sorts which depicted a swarm of Naruto clones beating up a chibi Sasuke, who sat there crying anime tears after the clones had disappeared. They laughed at the sight. Kurigakure lived up to its name. It was perpetually surrounded in mist, partly because of the special seals in the village walls and partially from the low clouds that constantly passed over the island, rolling in from the ocean. The few times it was clear was either in a heavy rain or a typhoon. All three Konoha teams were uncomfortable to say the least. The mist was constantly condensing into little water droplets, which ran down their necks and into their shirts, soaking them through and through. They kept on having to use a minor Kaiden jutsu that collected heat to their skin, keeping them warm and dry until the mist condensed again. It was annoying. They approached the gates that looked much like the ones in Konoha, only with the symbols for mist on them instead of fire. The Chunin and Junin that guarded the gate stood there to greet them. Halt. What is your business in Kurigakure? Ibiki stepped forwards and let out a small amount of killing intent, just enough to make him look even scarier. We're here to take the Chunin exams. The less experienced Chunin paled, while the Junin just brushed it off as one would a fly. I need to see your papers and your passports. The genin and their senseis lined up and presented their official documents, which each had a seal on them that repelled moisture, and continued inside the gate after they were approved. Naruto was in the back of the line under a henge that made him look completely different. He reached the Junin and handed him his papers. The Junin was smart enough to see the difference between the boy standing in front of him and the picture on the passport. Your picture does not match you. Naruto grinned quite maliciously and dropped his henge slowly, making it look as if his features just melded into his true form. He released a fair amount of killing intent directed solely at the Junin holding his passport. If you know what's good for you, let me in. I'm sure you've heard on my exploits, nay. Naruto's voice was dark and promised pain exponentially more than even the seventh layer of hell could give. The man read the name on the passport and the papers again. He paled instantly. His hands were shaking and it was taking almost all of his willpower to stop himself from pissing his pants and running away, screaming like a little girl. He was still a young Junin, but the chakra he felt in this boy was barely under that of the Mizukage. Yes, sir. Right away. He carefully stamped the paper and handed them back to the boy, who smirked and caught up with his teammates. Oi, Renji, what was that all about? That was the genin that single-handedly killed 2 sound Anbu and set the traps that killed at least 4 Junin, 9 Chunin, and 13 genin from the sound invasion. His fellow guard paled before fainting. His Junin friend wasn't too far from that point and was forced to sit down until he had collected his thoughts. A lone figure sat atop a tall building overlooking what little could be seen of Kurigakure. The breeze played with his orange-red bangs, uncovering the red tattoo in the shape of the kanji for love that adorned the left side of his forehead. That's his left side, not the left side of your perspective, the gourd strapped to his back along with his rather strange style of clothing made for a very intimidating figure. What truly stuck fear into the hearts of his enemies was the way that his black ringed eyes stared at you. Their blue-green depths seemed to show you the future, and it always was pain, torture, and an eventually long-awaited death. Hyuga Naruto, I'm coming for you. He continued to stare at the waxing moon in the sky. Naruto was grinning his huge foxy grin. His team was at his sides as they walked out of the Mist's Ninja Academy, happy with their progress on the first test. Sure, the questions were hard, but other people knew the answers. It was almost too easy to cheat. In any case, they'd passed the test easily. Then, there was the second part. Flashback. Now, for this part, you will each be given a tile. When everyone has a tile, they will all turn a certain color. If you get blue, your team gains 2 points. Purple gets you 1 extra. Green is neutral. Red will lose you 1. Orange will lose you 2. And finally, if you get one of the 3 black tiles, your team loses all your points and you are disqualified from the rest of the exam. Understood? Good. Let's get going then. After a few moments, all the remaining people in the room had a tile. Now, we'll reveal the colors. The examiner whipped through a few hand seals that were too fast for even Sasuke's partially awoken Sharingan to copy. After a few seconds, the tiles each started to turn into their respective colors. Naruto looked on in horror as his own tile started turning black. Thinking fast, used a hand seal less Kawarimi to switch it with the tile of the person next to him. There wasn't even the usual poof of smoke or even a noise. They just switched places, faster than any of the Chunin could have detected. The tile he got was green. He sighed in relief, looking around for his teammates. Hinata was grinning excitedly at her blue tile, while Choji was frowning at his red tile. All in all, his team still had enough points to easily pass. Unfortunately, the rock nin sitting next to Naruto wasn't so fortunate. End flashback. The 3 genin followed the crowd of other Chunin hopefuls to the location of their next exam. When they got there, the second examiner hushed the exited ninja. Okay, this is your second exam. Welcome to the Badlands. This area is the lowest part of the island, and actually averages 100 meters below sea level. This thick swamplands will be difficult to navigate through, and then there are the snakes, gators, spiders, and other such dangerous critters. You'll need all your skills to survive. Now, before we start, I need each person to turn in a release form. There will be deaths here, and I don't want to be held responsible. It's a load of paperwork. Here the man trailed off while the entire group sweat dropped, bringing the water of the swamps up at least an inch. In the end, everyone managed to sign the forms and get an object. Okay, now for the rules. As you see, each of you have received an additional headband. It either has the kanji for predator or prey on it. The objective is simple. Each prey team will be given a specific message, a piece of information. Their objective is to get to the other side of the Badlands and tell this information to the instructor there. Here he paused. As for the predator teams, their objectives are to start at the other side and capture and either interrogate a prey team, or bring their captives back here. Those who succeed in their objectives will proceed to the next exam. Prey teams, you start here. Predator teams, you follow me. With that, he took off at a rapid pace, skirting around the edge of the Badlands. The pace was difficult for many of the genin to keep up with, but most managed decently. About half of the teams were winded by the time they got there, and several of the weakest genin, Sakura and Ino for example, were already dead tired and had to dig into their soldier pill stash. Okay, when the exploding note goes off, you're free to go. Good hunting. The man smirked and did the poof thing. After a few tense moments, the note started burning. They watched in eager anticipation as it slowly was eaten away by the very slow burning flame. Time seemed to slow down, everything in slow motion. Finally, with just the smallest of explosions, think a gunshot, they genin teams took off. Each person wore their new headband things in an obvious spot, making sure that they were visible. In a mad scramble, for the less graceful of the bunch, they separated and went their own ways. Naruto, while feigning indifference, was carefully observing all the predator teams before they left. Looks like Sasuke Tem's team is with us, but Neji Ni-san's team isn't. Personally, I'm relieved that Suna team is a predator. He seems creepy. Like, more than Ibiki-sensei creepy. Let's see, there's a sound team, the only one in this exam, 2 mist teams, a grass team, and, looks like the last remaining stone team. Looks like they separated us in equal terms of power, and even amount of powerful, prey, and predator teams. This should be fun. They made their way to the topmost branches that would hold their weight and made their way slowly. After an hour of traveling, they sat down for a small rest. Hinata, I need you to look as far as you can in each direction, and move in a slow circle. I need you to scan for any prey team you can see. Okay. Hi, Choji, I want you to take an inventory. Keep most of the kunai and shuriken with yourself and Hinata, but leave me most of the trap items. I'll be farther back, so it'll be easier for me to set traps. Gotcha. I'll keep a closer scan going so that, in case Hinata misses someone approaching us, I'll see them and we can react. Any questions? Nope. None. Good. And so they did, waiting an hour before moving on to a new location. During their third stop, they finally found a prey team, who appeared to be from Cloud. Finally, Naruto whispered, a prey team. They'd already encountered several predator teams, and none had been too eager to fight them to reduce the amount of teams moving on to the third exam, due mostly to their reputation, but some of it had to do with the nearly 100 shadow clones that both Naruto and Hinata had made. Moving slowly through the treetops, Hinata and Choji shadowed them while Naruto set up a fair amount of traps in a clearing that Hinata was leading them to with a rather effective and nearly undetectable genjutsu. Finally, when things were set, Naruto contacted them through the small radios each one carried. Hinata, Choji, attack them from behind and drive them towards me. Roger, they said in unison. The 3 Cloud Nin were slowly making their way along a deer trail that had been enhanced by Hinata's genjutsu that made it seem like a very safe place to be. They didn't even notice anything. To their credit, they remained silent and moved with low Junin level stealth. Hinata and Choji made their way behind them. Without warning, Hinata reached out of the ground and grabbed one of the 3's legs. What the? He was pulled down up to his neck and a hand hit him in the neck, knocking him out very easily. Before the 2 had a chance to react decently, the hands disappeared. Their eyes widened and they screamed in horror as both a tsunami of mud and a gigantic fireball flew at them. They turned and ran haphazardly into the clearing where Naruto had set the traps. In their panicked frenzy, they didn't even notice the well-hidden loops or the trip wires. One was unfortunate enough to activate a trap that sent Senbon needles into several pressure points, knocking him out instantly. The other was pulled up into the treetops by the rope, only for some very strong ninja wire to wrap around him, pinning his arms at his sides. By the time Hinata and Choji made it to the clearing, Naruto was halfway through the interrogation. I'm glad that Ibiki-sensei taught us some of the more effective techniques for interrogation. The poor Cloud Nin was being thrown up and down, much like a yo-yo, yelling in terror the whole time, while Naruto was jerking the rope up and down with a bored look on his face. After a few more moments of this, Naruto pulled the man up and looked him in the eye. So, you ready to spill, or do I need to continue? As he said this, he pulled a very wicked curved dagger. One side was serrated, almost like a saw, while the other smooth, but obviously extremely sharp. Ah, no more, please. Naruto stood there as the man slowly calmed down into, well, now they could understand him, and he was no longer incoherently babbling. So, what was this message? The message is, here the man whispered something that only Naruto could hear. He sweat dropped. Don't mess with me. There's no way that could be it. I'm telling you the truth. Please believe me. Naruto looked over at Hinata, who nodded. Hey, you got lucky. I'm not taking a chance, though. You and your team are coming with us. With that, and the evil grin Naruto flashed him, he blacked out. Within a few hours, with the help of Kage Bunshin, Team 7 arrived at the group of examiners. With a nod to each other, Naruto walked forward to speak with the examiner. What was the message? The message was, the Mizukage is a pervert, and regularly reads Ika Ika Paradise and peeps at women in the hot springs. Team 7 instantly blushed deeply red, including Naruto. Well, your information is correct. They looked at him disbelievingly. Yup, we made it so that no one could guess it. Besides that, it's true. They all sweat dropped. Several hours later and most of the teams had returned. The ones left were disqualified and teams of Chunin were sent to look for them. Not all of them were found, and fewer were found alive. After a while, they arrived at a plateau that looked like it had been a mountain that had been cut smoothly by a gigantic sword. A small arena was in the center of the area, and they were led into it. It turned out that all the Kage used the exact same speech, and all the examiners interrupted in exactly the same way, except without the cough the Hayate usually gave. At the end of the decently long explanation, several people quit, leaving only 16 genin remaining. Now, we'll be holding a preliminary tournament. If you'll look at the screen over there, we'll see who our first fighters are. They all stared intently at the names rapidly cycling, so fast that only a few could follow its motion. Finally, it started slowing down before coming to a halt. First match. Damn it, I hate bronchitis. Meh, oh well, got some more done. Fear my cliffhanger. Although it's not as good as the last one, it still leaves you in suspense. Meh, oh well. You'll just have to wait for the next fight. As for a few questions in my reviews, Naruto will receive a couple of scrolls that once belonged to his father, although in my story, Yondaime didn't teach Hirushun to Jiraiya, and the scroll was destroyed in the Kyuubi attack, along with many of his other scrolls. So I'm going to have. I'm not gonna say. Don't wanna ruin the surprise, but to tell the truth, it's kinda cliché, maybe it'll do it though. Meh, oh well. Also, Neji was warming up to both Hinata and Naruto, but because they were honored, he believes it's only because they're main house, so he's jealous. That, and they're going to be married, and he won't be able to marry the one he loves because he'll probably be in an arranged marriage inside the Hyuga clan like most other branch members. Oops, told you a bit too much, didn't I? Oh well. Review. Laters. The names rapidly flashed across the screen, illegible to all but the quickest eyes. 2 names unfamiliar to any of the Konoha genin were shown. If you will, please leave the combat area. The Junin by those doors over there will lead you to your box seats. The 2 combatants, however, will remain. Nodding their consent, the Chunin hopefuls cleared out and went to their respective boxes. They were separated by village. All the genin were put in a box with each of their respective villages' genin. The Konoha genin walked into the open door to see. Absolute luxury. Huge high-backed leather recliners were lined up in front of the tinted window. A very impressive array of refreshments and beverages were available in the cupboards to the left of the room. The maroon leather of the chairs blended well with the dark blue carpet and violet-colored walls. This wasn't the gaudy violet you see on flashy t-shirts, nor was it the bright violet you sometimes see on cars. This was a deep majestic violet that any king worth his metal would love to have on his thick velvet cloak, in the typical fairy tale king style. Each person took their seats and procured their preferred snack as they sat. The typical goings-on between the Konoha genin was, going on. In other words, Naruto and Hinata were sniggling, Choji was slowly enjoying his snack, a tip from Ibiki-sensei, Sakura and Ino were fawning over their precious Uchiha, who was as cold as ever, reigning indifference. Lee was, stealthily observing, his rival, Neji, who was glaring at Hinata. Everyone else was watching the match, completely oblivious to their actions. Naruto, however, was deep in thought. Flashback. Naruto stood in a forest. He was still rather weak from chakra exhaustion, and the little he had wouldn't last him longer than a few days. He would have to gather it as quickly as possible before going to the Chunin exams. Damn it. How can I possibly do this? At the rate I usually go, it will take me nearly a year to get full again, and if I rush it, I could kill entire sections of the forest, or even disrupt the balance of the earth. Wait, I got it. Naruto dropped his crutch and gathered a fair amount of the latent chakra around him, just enough to make a cage bunshin. Poof. You know what to do. The clone nodded and jumped off into the treetops. Naruto did the same, but in the opposite direction. As they leapt from treetop to treetop, they gathered as much chakra as they dared. Finally, just as soon as they made enough to make one clone, they did so and the two separated. Soon, each clone made a clone, and each of those clones made a clone. It continued this way. If you happened to be a bird flying over this section of the forest, you would see a multitude of white dots flying through the treetops, randomly splitting into 2 white dots every once in a while. After nearly an hour, over 50 square miles were occupied by Naruto clones. Finally, they each spread out in equal distances, and started gathering as much chakra as they could without the usual bad side effects. Minutes passed, and slowly each clone gathered as much as it dared. Finally, the original Naruto stood up. With a smile, he sent the mental signal to each clone to activate the next step. A massive poof resounded throughout the forest in stereo as each clone dispelled itself. Instead of dissipating, the smoke that is generated flew back towards the epicenter of the area covered by the clones, which happened to be where Naruto was standing. The mist wrapped itself around the boy, slowly seeping into his body. A blue aura surrounded Naruto, much like it did when he fought the Anbu in his last mission. This time, however, instead of rolling off of him, it was absorbed into him. The seal on his stomach glowed an ominous red that contrasted greatly with the blue of the chakra surrounding him. Slowly, the aura diminished and receded. Finally, after nearly 15 minutes of being levitated by his own chakra, Naruto finally set foot onto the ground. With a contented smile, he let himself fall into unconsciousness, dreaming of a certain pale eyes fiancée of his. For this scene, imagine the part in Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, where the prince drank from that fountain and was levitated and was all glowy. That's what this looks like. End flashback. He smiled as Hinata pressed herself deeper into his embrace. He responded by lightly squeezing her hand and nuzzling the side of her neck. Slowly, his eyelids became heavier and heavier. The warmth, the comfort, and the handy-dandy built-in vibrating massager in the recliner helped him slowly drift off. Just as he was about to pass into dreamland, he was poked on the shoulder. Hinata, Naruto, wake up. Naruto's eyes flashed open only to see Hinata's amused and annoyed expression. What is it, Hina-chan? You're up next. Oh, okay. Over the speakers in the box he heard the Junin referee say, will Hyuga Naruto please enter the combat area? Naruto grinned. Time for my dynamic entry. Hinata giggled and pulled him into a very passionate kiss that left him somewhat dazed for a few seconds after she finally pulled away. Go get him, Naru-chan. Naruto smirked, as was taught to him by the Hyuga, before disappearing in a flash of blue. The crowd in the private boxes, as well as the few higher-ups who were watching from the front of the room instead of a box of their own, watched in anticipation. The general thought going through their heads was something along the line of, finally, we'll get to see the shadow wraith of Konoha in action firsthand, and live to tell the tale. Suddenly, the floor of the room distorted. It became a liquid, while still retaining its texture and color. To imagine what it looks like, think about how, when you were a kid, you used to hack a loogie and drip it out your mouth and see how far down it goes before sucking it back up again without dripping any. Inverse that. Drop, shape, and imagine it rising from the ground. That's what the entire audience saw. It started swelling before popping with a small pop. The liquid dissipated to reveal the floor where it started completely undamaged. Where the weird loogie-like bubble was before now stood Naruto. His pale cream-colored Hyuga training jacket was immaculate, as was his black pants. The only difference between this outfit and the outfit he wore on his graduation day was that instead of white bandages like Neji, his were black, and instead of wearing his forehead protector around his left leg, he wore a wristband that had a metal plate on it with the leaf symbol engraved on it. He only uses his wraith costume when on serious missions or when he gets into a serious fight. All in all, he looked like a blonde Hyuga with slightly discolored eyes and spiky hair. His opponent was a mist nin, if his forehead protector was any indication. He wore typical black shinobi pants and sandals, and a dark green t-shirt. Over this was an off-white trench coat that would, no doubt, blend in perfectly in a fog. His mist forehead protector was sewn onto the of his trench coat, like a name tag on a soldier's uniform. His hair was an interesting color. It was a deep, dark, almost pine-colored green. He wore it in a style that was bizarrely similar to that of the Uchiha style. His eyes were a deep green as well, just a shade or two lighter than his hair. He had two deep green marks under his eyes that vaguely resembled geometric-styled boomerangs. They followed the curve of his lower eyelid, only about a half of an inch below it. The expression on the boy's face was a mixture of curiosity and a little anxiety, but was covered by a mask of anticipation. So, you're the infamous Shadow Wraith, huh? You don't look so tough. Fighters ready. Begin. Naruto just slipped into a typical Gyuken stance. Much like the Byakugan, when Naruto needed to concentrate enough to see the Tenketsu, the veins around his eyes bulged out, giving the use a very intimidating stare. Hey, though so, time to show you what a real shinobi can do. With a few hand seals, the boy slowly gathered a mist around himself. The mist drifted off of him in a strange parody of Naruto's shadow mist technique he used on his mission. The mist seeping off the boy slowly started forming speakers. It took almost all of Naruto's willpower not to sweat drop at the sight. I bet you're wondering what this is about, nay. Well, I think I'll save you a monologue like the ones you Hyuga are so famous for and just show you. With a snap of his fingers, the speakers started playing. The pulsing thump of the hardcore trance that was being played resonated in each and every person's chest, giving them a feeling almost like they were being physically struck. The mist genin grinned most evilly before slowly closing his eyes. Slowly, he let the music take over. His moves suddenly seemed to fuse into the sound of the song. It was like his body became the physical representation of the music. Naruto frowned before launching a few shuriken at the dancing genin. The guy just sidestepped without missing a beat. Finally, the music reached a slow point. The high-pitched, yet strangely calming chord being played was the only sound. Slowly, the boy's eyes opened. Killer intent suddenly spiked out of the boy. Despite being a master of killer intent himself, Naruto was rooted to the spot. The music suddenly launched directly into a full-blown hardcore climax of the song. As it did so, the genin launched himself at Naruto. The first few hits painfully connected, but the pain was enough to snap Naruto out of his stupor. As the music played on, the two seemed to flow with it. The mist nin attacked in tandem with the changes in the music, while Naruto blocked them, giving the illusion that they were dancing. In truth they were, only it was a dance of death. Their flowing, graceful, water-like movements slowly blurred faster and faster. It finally got to the point where only the most experienced could keep up with their speed. Finally, with a loud final thump of the music, the two flew apart. Both crashed into the opposite walls of the arena. A plume of dust and debris covered the impact points. Slowly, as it drifted away or settled onto the floor, the figures of two people were revealed in their respective areas. Naruto was standing in front of a rather large crater in the wall, but looked mostly unharmed. The other genin wasn't so lucky. He was down on one knee, breathing heavily. You're good, you know. Thank you. Your technique is rather unique as well. Perhaps if you put a genjutsu that used the music to disorientate your opponent, you would do better. Wow, I never thought of that. Naruto smiled. Now, I think it's time to end this. Funny, I was thinking the same thing. Naruto smoothly dropped into a very advanced Jiyuken stance, while his opponent cued another song, this time heavy metal, screaming singer included. With a burst of speed in time with the heavy strumming of the guitar, the mist genin shot forwards. He made a few seals before calling out, Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. Several of his copies appeared next to him. They continued running at Naruto, who just held his stance. Suddenly, time seemed to stop. Even the music went quiet. You are within range of my divination. Everyone's eyes went wide, as even the mist shinobi knew about the Hyuga divination field. With a sudden burst of chakra, Naruto jumped forwards, calling out each series of strikes as he landed them. 2 strikes, 4 strikes, 8 strikes, 16 strikes, 32 strikes, 64 strikes. Hake, Rokuju Yansho, Naruto said in a calm voice. You no longer have the ability to mold chakra. You will also find it difficult to move. Be lucky, I only used processed chakra. You should regain use of your arms and legs in a few hours. Winner, Hyuga Naruto. Applause came from the stands where the Mizukage and his attendants watched. Smiling, Naruto reached down and grabbed the mist genin's hand, pulling him to his feet. Hey, that was a good match. Yeah, I lost though. Don't worry about it too much. In case you didn't know, I'm Hyuga Naruto. Daisuke. Mizu Daisuke. Mizu. Huh, I'm guessing you were an orphan, weren't you? Yeah, how'd you know? Isn't it standard procedure in Kurigakure to give their orphans the surname Mizu when they don't have any official record for them? Why, yeah, you know, I was an orphan until I was 6. What? Really? Yeah. Then I developed these eyes, and I was adopted into the Hyuga. My surname before that was Uzumaki, but I'm sure that was one given to me in the aftermath of the Kyuubi attack. You're familiar with that event, aren't you? Why, yeah. For a minute, the silence was oppressive as the medic nin that made their way to the genin arrived, checking over Daisuke for any injury. Naruto suddenly reached into a pocket and pulled out a scroll. He opened it and used the pen that was wrapped in it to write something down quickly. By the time the medic nin were done loading their patient onto the stretcher, Naruto had torn off the note he wrote. Rolling it up quickly, he walked up beside the injured Miss Genin. Hey, if you ever need help, send word to the Hyuga compound in Konoha, okay? Be sure to ask for either Hyuga Naruto or Hyuga Hinata. Oh, and here's a small parting gift. Smiling, Naruto tucked the piece of paper into the boy's hand. Arigato. The boy slowly unwrapped the paper, and read it over several times. Genjutsu, he muttered. Hyuga Naruto. I'll remember you. Naruto smiled and walked away. He made his way up to the box, where he was greeted enthusiastically by Hinata and Choji. Naruto-kun. Hinata glomped him before he had a chance to take even one step into the room. Good job, Naruto. Thanks, Choji. Making their way back to their chairs and resumed their preferred activities. After a minute, Hinata finally asked, Naruto, why did you give that paper to that guy? Because, Hinata, he reminded me of how I used to be before I was adopted. His eyes, they were the eyes of someone who is always alone, eyes full of hurt. I see. I'm glad, Hina-chan. The next match was being chosen, as shown by the flashing names on the screen. Finally, the next two names were shown on the screen. Match 3, Rock Lee vs Akamichi Choji. Yosh. It's my turn. Choji sighed. Of all people, why did I have to get the fashion challenged, weirdo? They made their way down to the middle of the arena. Begin. Lee shot out like a flash, pulling up into one of his typical moves. Konoha Senpu. Choji stepped back and avoided the kick to his head, but failed to see the next one to his ankles. Falling hard, he dodged the next few blows by rolling around on the ground and pushing himself up into a back flip, landing on his feet. You are quite acrobatic. You're an eyesore, but I'll give you the fact that you're fast. Thank you. My flames of youth burn brightly. I only hope that your defeat will not diminish your flames, only that they may burn brighter to match the beauty of mine. Choji, instead of talking, took the opportunity to flash through some hand seals. Not bothering to announce his jutsu, he watched in amusement as a huge gust of wind blasted the spandex-clad weirdo into the wall of the arena. Less talk, more pain, fuzzy brows. As Naruto is now somewhat formal, Choji developed a tendency to make nicknames for everyone he meets. Lee got up and charged again. They two traded blows and blocks, seeming on even ground. Smirking suddenly, Lee's punch turned into a hand-grabbing something. Choji didn't have the time to react as he felt the ninja wire wrapped around his feet tighten. He felt himself leave the ground as Lee started to spin, swinging Choji along for the ride. Finally, Lee let the poor boy go, yelling, "Konoha Typhoon." Boom. From the point of impact against the side of the wall, cracks spread out like spider webs, reaching all the way to the lip of the arena wall. With a rumble and a crack, the entire wall collapsed on the place where the poor boy lay. By the time the dust and dirt cleared and one could see clearly, a pile of rubble lay where Choji had fallen. Rocks the size of cars lay piled upon each other, along with a fine mixing of sand and gravel. In short, it was impossible to have survived. No, Choji. Naruto and Hinata watched in horror. They waited, hoping, praying that some sort of movement could be seen, but there was nothing. Even Lee himself seemed shocked that he had done so much damage, even killing a fellow Konoha shinobi. No. No. Naruto's yell reverberated through the arena. His cry of anguish was so full of heartbreak that even the most battle-hardened Junin were moved. Tears unashamedly streamed down his face as he and Hinata openly wept for their fallen teammate. Such a sad turn of affairs, winner. Before the referee could finish his statement, a rumbling shook the arena. Rocks shifted and groaned as they were forcibly pushed aside. With a sudden spike of chakra, the pile of rubble exploded outwards, sending Rock Lee and the referee into the opposite walls. From out of the wreckage crawled a somewhat bruised and beaten Choji. His shirt was ripped off and his pants were in tatters, although they held together enough to allow him some decent modesty. Instead of the butterball he was a few years ago, there stood a very well-sculpted figure. He still had a layer of fat, but it wasn't as prominent as it was before, and you could easily see the well-toned muscled rippling beneath the surface of his skin. He reached up with a bandaged hand and wiped the small stream of blood that came out of his mouth. However, what everyone in the arena was staring at wasn't his figure, or his blood, or the fact that he had turned a small hill of rubble into a 30-foot crater. It was the seal on his chest. The circle that covered his entire torso contained an intricate geometric pattern that held a myriad of kanji and other unknown symbols. From the outside of the circle, a strange pattern of tribal tattoos ran down the length of his arms, legs, neck, and even on his face. The entire thing glowed a dark and ominous red, bathing the boy in a barely visible red light. Didn't think I'd have to reveal this so soon. I see. I don't have all day, Lee. Let's finish this. Guy-sensei, forgive me. Lee reached down and patted each leg. He suddenly jumped and twisted in mid-air, turning into a back flip. Kicking each leg, he sent each weight flying at incredible speeds directly at Choji. Choji's hands extended themselves towards the ground, his palms down. With a sudden jerk, he brought them up just as the weights reached him. Two spikes of pure stone rose out of the ground to intercept the projectiles. When the dust cleared, the two spikes were devastated, but it was obvious that Choji was unharmed, as the weights hadn't been able to continue their journey. Nani. With this seal, I can control Earth, to a certain degree. My elemental affinity is Earth, and this just allows my chakra to control it at will. It drains my chakra rather quickly, but thanks to my training, I recover faster than it drains. I see. Then, it seems that I'll have to use it. No, Lee, it's forbidden. I'm sorry, Guy-sensei. I will not lose this fight. Lee darted out of sight only to appear inside Choji's guard. His kicked upwards at his chin and made contact, only to be thrown back 20 feet howling in pain. A large bar of earth stood in front of Choji, having obviously slammed into the attacking taijutsu specialist before he could complete his kick. Lee slowly stood up. Time to go wild. Again he disappeared, only to reappear only to throw another blow at Choji. Walls, spikes, and even flying balls of earth foiled most attacks, and most of the others that got through were blocked by Choji's arms and legs. However, the few that managed to land solid blows still hurt him, slowing him down. The constant use of his power also was draining his chakra. Again, Lee jumped to the attack again. This time, Choji swept his hand up and out, sending a wave of earth at the oncoming boy. Ahhhhhh. Lee was, yet again, thrown against the wall. He couldn't escape in time, and found that stone shackles now pinned his arms and legs to the wall. Spikes rose up out of the ground and closed the distance. They stopped, millimeters from Lee's stuck body. Referee, he is unable to move, and if I so please, I could skewer him. This match is over. Not yet, it isn't. With a sudden puff of smoke, Lee disappeared and reappeared behind Choji. The massive kick knocked the boy forwards, only to get kicked in the chin and get shot into the air. Bandages wrapped themselves around Choji's body, preventing him from moving. Suddenly, he found himself spinning and heading straight towards the ground. Bam! The impact threw yet another cloud of dust into the air. Again, the entire audience waited in anticipation for the dust to clear. When it finally did, they found Choji floating on his back in a puddle of mud, obviously unconscious. Lee was barely standing a few feet away, breathing heavily. Winner, Rock Lee. Silence. Everyone was too stunned to believe the outcome. The powers and skills shown in this match made the other two matches look like academy students in a street brawl. As Lee collapsed onto his back, Neji jumped down to stand next to him. How did you do that, Kawarimi? I thought you couldn't use jutsu. Kawarimi tags. Guy-sensei helped me make them. They work just like the jutsu, only I don't need hand seals and I can only go where the tag was before. The little chakra I have can be used to activate them, but I still can't use jutsu. With that, he fell unconscious, a smile on his face as he saw Guy-sensei standing over Neji. The look of pride on his face was more than obvious. Let's go, Neji. The medic Nin took the two shinobi to the infirmary so they can rest and be healed. Guy and Neji started walking back to the box, but stopped when they heard the referee speak. Hyuga Neji vs Hyuga Hinata.